Hello everyone, this is Torin here with another Warhammer Total War online commentary. So in the spirit of the Grim and the Grave, I'm going to continue to upload some Vampire Counts games and experiment with slightly different army compositions here. So hopefully this is a fun one for you guys. So I'm going to be playing the Vampire Counts. My opponent is going to be playing Empire. So we both have units from the new DLC. I know he has some renowned regiments over there, so we'll see how that plays out for him. So on my front line, I have Skeleton Warriors, just standard shielded skeletons, very, very good against Empire. They absorb missile fire and are just, pretty well rounded. And to be honest, their combat stats aren't that bad. 26 weapon strength, it could be worse. Much better than zombies, of course. In the secondary line, I have Grave Guard. So these guys are armored, shielded, anti-infantry. So again, most Empire infantry, other than greatswords, aren't very heavily armored. And, the Grave Guard can usually get through them, even with their, lack of armor piercing. So big fan of those guys. And then I have a Mortis Engine. So getting that regeneration, it's really, really nice to keep it in your central army here, and it does pretty well for you. So I definitely like that. Looks like I have my White King here, and it's interesting. It says he's discouraged by an ability already. So it's not good for me, but regardless, he's pretty good in your front line. He hits like a truck. He also is able to carry a potion, so he's can last a long time. And even once your skeletons and Graveguard start to crumble, he usually stays for quite a while and can fight to the death. So big fan of that unit. Then I also brought a group of Crypt Horrors. And I also do have the Strigoi Ghoul King, who can summon another group of Crypt Horrors if need be, but these are great against Greatswords, and that's usually where I use them. So the Greatswords, they don't have a lot of armor, so the armor piercing of the Greatswords isn't that big of a deal. They have armor piercing themselves, and also apply poison, so very, very good against those type of units. Then I have the Strigoi Ghoul King on the Terrorgeist, which is very strong. So he's armor piercing, he's anti-large, he causes terror, he applies poison. And also when he's on the Terrorgeist, one of his biggest weaknesses is the fact that he doesn't have a lot of armor. But when you put him on the Terrorgeist, he gets 80 armor, which is nothing to sneeze at. And again, he is a very, very good duelist, especially on the Terrorgeist. And I have Fellbats here. Fellbats are amazing. You can use them to tie up cavalry charges. You can use them to dive missile units, siege units. And I think they should be a staple of every Vampire Counts army. So I also have Vargeist here. Vargeist are a great supplement to the Strigoi Ghoul King. You kind of use them in tandem with one another to dive bomb pertinent targets, and at the end of the day, I feel it's quite strong. Then over here, I have two Blood Knights. Or no, not two, excuse me. I have the Dire Pack and then Blood Knights. So this is a good tag team against Demogryph Knights because the dogs will tie them up, and Demogryph Knights usually, will take a while to cut through the Dire Pack, and then the Blood Knights can come in and skewer them. Hopefully, that's ideally how it goes. So my opponent has Demogryph Knights with Halberds, who are a good choice. Vampire Counts do have a lot of large monsters type units. They'll be good against the Strigoi Ghoul King, Crypt Horrors, all kinds of stuff, as well as my cavalry. So not a bad choice there. In his front line, he has Spearmen. So anti-large, charge defense against large foes. Pretty good choice against Vampire Counts. So again, Vampire Counts don't have any missiles, so you don't really need swordsmen or other things like this, and they do have that anti-large bonus. So if they can tie up my Crypt Horrors and those type of units with these, it's pretty hard to get through them, actually. So definitely a good choice on my opponent's part. Looks like he has a great cannon here. Personally, I don't like artillery against the Vampire Counts. I feel like they can dive bomb it too easily with just a single group of bats and just completely shut it down. But regardless, if he can get some decent targeting on some of my more high-value units before I get there, could pay off. So he has Crossbowmen, another good choice. Very good at targeting down Crypt Horrors and various other flying units, so not bad at all. It looks like he has the Light Wizard, and he has several groups of Greatswords back here, so I will definitely need to summon some Crypt Horrors and make sure they're on that target there. So, and he also brought Karl Franz, which is very, very cool. I've actually been seeing Karl more lately since the new DLC, since they nerfed the potions and that type of thing. So he's definitely a force to be reckoned with, and he can definitely put up a great fight against the Strigoi Ghoul King. Then more Spearmen here, and another group of Demogryph Knights to bring it full circle. So let's go ahead and get started, guys. And this is a really fun map. I know I say it every time I play, but this is definitely one of my most favorite maps design-wise. I really like what you can do up here with missile units. And again, I'm playing Vampire Counts, so it's not much that I can do with the terrain there, but it's just a really fun map. I like the starting location, so you kind of start shrouded in the forest, and your opponents don't have much time to kind of examine your army since it's not open field. So right now, my opponent has developed a defensive formation. It looks like he has his Spearmen supplementing this great cannon, so clearly when I get close, he'll advance to protect it. He has a secondary line here of Spearmen protecting with Crossbowmen in the back line, so I wasn't terribly afraid of these two Crossbowmen groups, and I felt like I had a serious air advantage to the point where I could actually just charge in and chase Karl Franz off the battlefield. So you see I'm taking some missile fire. He also uses a magic missile effect on the Strigoi Ghoul King and does a nice little chunk of damage. And also I am taking some cannon fire, but my troops are advancing, pretty unopposed there. So I did see that he had the cavalry here in the forest, and I wanted to get my troops over there and get a solid engagement because I didn't actually see his other group, so I assumed that was all he had. So Right now, I sicked the fell bats on Karl Franz. I figured, I'm not going to catch him. So just sick the bats on him to tie him up, and I also sicked the Vargeist. So those two together should be able to do good damage. And I did land the Strigoi Ghoul King over here on these crossbowmen, and was able to get a great engagement. And the fell bats were able to come. And you can see the Strigoi Ghoul King on that Terrorgeist just tore through this group. He is definitely very, very powerful, but my opponent reacts quite well, gets his Demogryph Knights in position, and will force me out. But at this point, he's already taking some serious losses. So, and over here, Karl Franz will win this battle. But this is going to occupy him for a long time, and it's definitely a stressful situation to be in for Karl. Also over here, I was able to get the Dire Pack on them. So the Demogryph Knights did charge. They engaged the Dire Pack and did decent damage, but then the Blood Knights came in. So that's exactly what you want. And, my opponent does bring some Spearmen over, which I have to be very cognizant of. So in the front line, our forces are getting ready to engage. So what I like to do is just send in the White King, have him absorb the initial shock, and have my opponent send all his infantry on it. And then I just, have the potion, and the other troops can follow up and get a pretty decent engagement. So the Strigoi Ghoul King had gotten in there, but was chased off by the Demogryph Knights, but not before he did some, great work. And I also summoned Crypt Ghouls back here, which you can see are still tying these guys up and are, poisoning them and are being very, very annoying. And that's why I was able to cut through those troops so fast. It's just so powerful to fly over the back line, summon an entire regiment of units right on top of missile units. So we've engaged in the front line. Things are going pretty well for me here. You can see the skeletons. This is not a good engagement for these spearmen. And then the Graveguard are going to come in, and I'm going to be pulling up the Mortis engine for that draining effect. So things are going pretty well, and you can see what I'm saying, guys. The cannon's already offline, and it barely generated any value. So I definitely can't complain. But my opponent still has quite a few troops on auxiliary. He's keeping his greatswords back here, so definitely deceptive as far as how things are going. He can definitely, once these guys come out, it's going to be tough for my front line. He has a very, very sturdy group of greatswords here. You see Karl Franz did win that battle versus Vargeist, but at a great cost. So now he's definitely in some trouble, but my opponent also did a very good job of killing quite a few of these Blood Knights with these spearmen. I was trying to outmaneuver him, but Karl Franz was over there supporting, and it was a tough situation. But regardless, you can see the Mortis engine is now right in the front line. It's draining all of these units, and this is a great unit. It did take some cannon fire as I approached, but now it's going to be stable most of the battle, and it's going to provide healing and draining to all of these units. So over here, I was able to penetrate his front line with some skeleton spearmen. I pushed them back, and I also summoned some cryptors here, who I wasn't terribly keen on microing there. It was definitely my mistake, but they are back there, and the armor piercing isn't going to be bad. So I think I was trying to pull them to come in the front line and get a flank here, but most of his back line has been penetrated at this point. The draining effect in conjunction with the terror and all those other units were able to break through his front line, and you can see the floodgates are essentially open now. And my Blood Knights are taking a beating, and they are surrounded by spearmen, so my opponent again did a very good job of just chasing them and being really on top of that. But unfortunately, Karl Franz did die. I'm sorry I didn't get to show you guys that, but the Strigoi King did fly up and was able to poison him, and he was very low from that previous engagement. So definitely very good for me. And you guys can see this green aura here. That's a healing effect that's coming from the Mortis engine. So you can see right here, if you guys look at the health orbs, they've actually been healed for about 800, 900 hit points, which is just so good. Actually that was the Strigoi King, but that's something new that also is in this patch, is that units can only be healed for a certain amount, which is definitely good, especially since they incorporated the Mortis engine, other healing effects as well. But my opponent's army is still putting up a fight. His greatswords are definitely trying their best, but at this point they're being periodically drained. They're engaged with fodder units, and the Graveguard, though the greatswords are better, the Graveguard will do pretty good at getting through them. I also do have a group of Cryptors over here who are able to tie up the Demogryph Knights, and the Mortis engine itself is nothing to laugh at in terms of combat capabilities. It has 120 attack as well as armor piercing capabilities, if I'm not mistaken. So it's going to be very good in this engagement here. And of course, the skeletons are just so good at tying up units there. Across the battlefield, it's going pretty well. Most of my opponent's forces are routed or broken or running through the forest. So, but it's still fight. Some of his troops are still fighting. These greatswords, though they're shaken, are doing pretty well. The Strigoi King has taken a little bit of damage himself, but he does have pretty good regeneration. And this is where he wants to be, is fighting these type of units, because he does have the armor piercing. On the Terrorgeist, he's going to do very, very heavy damage to all of these guys. You can see he's marching through and allowing the fodder units to really penetrate there. So definitely cannot complain. And I really like this Mortis engine. It's definitely one of my new favorite additions. It just gives you such a sustainable center line, and Vampire Counts definitely play that atrocious warfare style, and it just is a huge addition. So I'm definitely a big fan of this unit. Over here, he does have some greatswords fighting. He did buff them with Birona's Time Warp, giving them speed and melee attack, and they are cutting through these skeletons quite well, but again, that's not an engagement you want at all, and skeletons are just such good fodder units. So one thing that I probably would have done slightly differently if I were my opponent, I wouldn't have held those greatswords in auxiliary for too long. They sat back there a long time, and that was a very valuable window of time where my opponent's melee line was getting crumbled, and he needed those greatswords in there to really be fighting and pushing back. And also he should have probably had Karl Franz in the center line there. I think that would have made a big difference, because Karl, he should have just landed it, and then it would have been able to be supported by his other troops, and wouldn't have been able to be so easily targeted by those Vargas. So at this point, most of my opponent's army has routed off, and that is the game. So it was definitely a good matchup. Karl, put up a good fight. You guys see, look how good these greatswords did. And most of his spearmen were crumbled by the time the greatswords got there. So then they were isolated alone against fodder units. Having a little bit of delay in terms of auxiliary support is fine. But with a faction like the Empire, having Karl with the encouragement and that strong combat capabilities in the front line would have been huge. And then at the same time, he would have had support if the Vargas landed to fight him. The spearmen would have been there waiting for the Vargas. So definitely, just my 2 cents is that they should have been in the front line. But other than that, Demogryph Knight, one group did quite well, but the other one got crushed by this combo here, the Dire Pack and the Blood Knights. Definitely one of my favorite new combos. So again, really good game to my opponent, Rope Passant. Look forward to seeing you again on Ladder, and I just want to thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed that game, and more content coming soon. Have a great day, guys. Take care.